One of the highlights of my college experience was 2 semesters of art and humanities. I learned about the art and architecture from the early Greek and Romans up through the Renaissance and on into the modern period. Some painters had styles that stood out as being extraordinarily recognizable. Certainly one of those was Caravaggio. There have been many artistic renderings of the Emmaus story, but one of the most famous is his Supper at Emmaus, which captures the dramatic high point of the story, the moment after Jesus had broken the bread, when their eyes were opened and they recognized him. There is surprise in the posture of the 2 disciples. One has thrown his arms open in astonishment, and the other is pushing his chair back from the table, abruptly standing up. There's an empty place at the table, at the foreground. It's almost as if there's another chair just out of the frame of the picture. There's another place at the table. Whose is it? Well, that place is ours. The artist is inviting us right into the painting to take our place at the supper table and share the disciples' astonishment. A fruit basket at the front of the table is placed precariously on the edge. It's a silent invitation. Come and eat. But remember this, unlike the 2 disciples in the painting, we can't see Jesus' wounds. We're not first-hand witnesses to the resurrection, and we never can be. Yet the artist invites us to take our place at the table all the same. Peter, in his epistle, continues to extend that invitation to disciples then and now. The point of Christ's sacrifice is not just, you see, to give us a place at the table, but is instead to show us more clearly what it means to live a new and more abundant life, a life in which we recognize Jesus and thus discover God in new ways, straight from the heart. Ways that cause our hearts to burn within us and send us running to share that discovery with others. So what does that kind of life look like? Well, according to Peter, it offers the purification of our souls by obedience to the truth. And there's really nothing hip or ironic or clever about that kind of obedience. It's simply a deep and heartfelt connection to the one person who was sent by God to show us the way to live and to save us from death and despair. When we are obedient to Jesus, then we are tied tightly to the love and compassion that can hold us when we begin to plummet and deliver us to safety. Peter wraps it up by saying that the purpose of this kind of life is so that we might have genuine mutual love. And if that isn't clear enough, he adds, love one another straight from the heart. Benjamin Franklin put it another way to John Hancock. We must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly we will all hang separately. Barbara Brown Taylor tells the story of her nephew Will's first birthday party. The little boy, as you can imagine, was at the center of everyone's attention, and so he was happily doing a little dance until a jealous 7-year-old named Jason charged over, put both of his hands on Will's chest and shoved. Will fell hard. His rear end hit first, and then his head with a crack. And he looked utterly surprised at first. No one had ever hurt him before, and he just didn't know what to make of it. Then he opened his mouth and howled, but not for long. His mother hugged him and helped him to his feet. And the first thing little Will did was totter over to Jason. He knew that Jason was at the bottom of this thing, but such meanness was new to him and he didn't know what to do, so he did what he had always done. He put his arms around Jason and laid his head against that mean little boy's body. What Will did to Jason put an end to the meanness in that room, observes Taylor. And that is what love is. Not a warm feeling between like-minded friends, but plain old imitation of Christ, who took all the meanness of the world and ran it through the filter of his own body, repaying evil with good, blame with pardon, death with life. Call it divine reverse psychology. It worked once, and it can work again, whenever God can find someone else willing to try. So are you willing to give it a try? To show genuine mutual affection, loving one another deeply from the heart, to purify your soul by obedience to the truth, to set your hope and faith on God, the one who raised Jesus from the dead and gave him glory? When we love straight from the heart, we begin to plant seeds of goodness and mercy and patience and compassion, and we begin to look more and more like Christ, and we see one another through the eyes of Christ. Carl was a quiet man. He didn't talk much. He would always greet you with a big smile and a firm handshake. Even after living in his neighborhood for over 50 years, no one could really say they knew him very well. Before his retirement, he took the bus to work each morning. The lone sight of him walking down the street often worried his neighbors. He had a slight limp from a bullet wound received in World War II, and watching him, they worried that although he had survived the war, he might not make it through their changing uptown neighborhood with its ever-increasing random violence, gangs, and drug use. When he saw the flyer at his local church asking for volunteers to care for the gardens behind the minister's residence, he responded in his characteristically unassuming manner. Without fanfare, he just signed up. He was well into his 87th year when the very thing we had always feared finally happened, said one of his neighbors. He was just finishing his watering for the day when 3 gang members approached him. Ignoring their attempt to intimidate him, he simply asked, "Would you like a drink from the hose?" The tallest and toughest looking of the 3 said, "Yeah, sure," with a malevolent little smile. And as Carl offered the hose to him, the other 2 grabbed Carl's arm, throwing him down. And as the hose snaked crazily over the ground, dousing everything in its way, Carl's assailants stole his retirement watch and his wallet, and then fled. Carl tried to get himself up, but he had been thrown down on his bad leg, so he lay there trying to gather himself as the minister came running to help him. Although the minister had witnessed the attack from his window, he hadn't been able to get there fast enough to stop it. "Carl, are you okay? Are you hurt?" the minister kept asking as he helped Carl to his feet. Carl just passed a hand over his brow and sighed, shaking his head. "Just some punk kids. I hope they'll wise up someday." His wet clothes clung to his slight frame as he bent to pick up the hose. He adjusted the nozzle again and started to water. Confused and a little concerned, the minister asked, "Carl, what are you doing?" "I've got to finish my watering. It's been very dry lately," came the calm reply. Satisfying himself that Carl really was all right, the minister could only marvel. Carl was a man from a different time and place. A few weeks later, the 3 returned. Just as before, their threat was unchallenged. Carl again offered them a drink from the hose. This time they didn't rob him. They wrenched the hose from his hand and drenched him head to foot with the icy water. When they had finished their humiliation of him, they sauntered off down the street, throwing catcalls and curses, falling over one another, laughing at the hilarity of what they had just done. Carl just watched them, and then he turned toward the warmth-giving sun, picked up his hose, and went on with his watering. The summer was quickly fading into fall. Carl was doing some tilling when he was startled by the sudden approach of someone behind him. He stumbled and fell into some evergreen branches, and as he struggled to regain his footing, He turned to see the tall leader of his summer tormentors reaching down for him, and he braced himself for the expected attack. "Don't worry, old man. I'm not going to hurt you this time," the young man spoke softly, still offering the tattooed and scarred hand to Carl. And as he helped Carl get up, the man pulled a crumpled bag from his pocket and handed it to Carl. "What's this?" Carl asked. "It's your stuff," the man explained. "It's your stuff back, even the money in your wallet." "I don't understand," Carl said. "Why would you help me now?" And the man, shifting his feet, seeming embarrassed and ill at ease, said, "I learned something from you. I ran with that gang and hurt people like you. We picked you because you were old and we knew we could do it, but every time we came and did something to you, instead of yelling and fighting back, you tried to give us a drink. You didn't hate us for hating you. You kept showing love against our hate." He stopped for a moment. "I couldn't sleep after stealing your stuff, so here it is back." He paused for another awkward moment, not knowing what more he could say. "That bag's my way of saying thanks for straightening me out, I guess." And with that, he walked off down the street. Carl looked down at the sack in his hands and gingerly opened it. He took out his retirement watch and put it back on his wrist. Opening his wallet, he checked for his wedding photo. He gazed for a moment at the young bride that still smiled back at him from all those years ago. He died one cold day after Christmas that winter. Many people attended his funeral in spite of the weather. In particular, the minister noticed a tall young man that he didn't know sitting quietly in a distant corner of the church. During the sermon, the minister spoke of Carl's garden, calling it a lesson in life. And in a voice made thick with unshed tears, he said, "Do your best and make your garden as beautiful as you can. We will never forget Carl's garden." The following spring, another announcement was made in the church bulletin requesting a person needed to care for Carl's garden. Like so many of those announcements, it went unheeded by members of the church until one day there was a knock at the pastor's door. Opening the door, the minister saw the young man he had seen at Carl's funeral. "I believe this is my job, if you'll have me," the young man said. The young man went to work, and over the next several years, he tended the flowers and shrubs just as Carl had done. During that time, he finished high school, went on to college, even got married. He joined in community projects and became a leader in his hometown. One day, the young man came to see the minister and explained that he could no longer care for the garden. He said with a shy and happy smile, "My wife just had a baby boy, and we're bringing him home tomorrow." "Congratulations," said the minister as he accepted the keys to the garden shed. "That's wonderful. What's the boy's name?" "Carl. We named him Carl," he replied. Like Carl's garden ministry, Jesus' ministry showed and shared a depth of love unseen in that time. He ate and spent time with those considered unworthy of his attention, and we remember that at the heart, his message was unconditional love. To offer ourselves straight from the heart is the seed that he planted in us. And there is nothing more exciting than watching a seed flourish and grow into something beautiful. Amen.